Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics. We are three film geeks discussing movies, both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Jim Parsons voices an alien looking for home. Sean Penn is the Gunman. 70s horror tropes return in It Follows. And we'll review faith-based drama Do You Believe and musical drama Rudderless. Our triple feature of older films is new classic Philomena, Joe's pick for old classic American Psycho, and our Oscar A to Z continues with Atlantic City. First up, though, we're going to talk about Home, which had a very big debut weekend, about $55 million in the can. And in this film, Jim Parsons voices O, the Boov alien, in the one and only DreamWorks Animation Studios film of 2015. The entire Boov population are on the run from their enemy, the Gorgs, and decide to inhabit Earth to hide out. In the process, they take all the humans and relocate them elsewhere on the planet. A girl named Tip, spared because of her cat that confused the Boov sensors, and voiced by Rihanna, is now a fugitive and runs into O, who becomes a fugitive as well because of an Evite he accidentally sent to the Gorgs. The two team up to try and stop the Gorgs and also find Tip's relocated mom. Steve Martin and Jennifer Lawrence.
I wish.
Oh, God, I wish. Steve Martin and Jennifer Lopez lend their voices as well in supporting roles. The best element of Home by a mile is Parsons' voice talent. He adds such a likability to this character who could have been so annoying and derivative. He is not completely removed from his famous Big Bang Theory character in that he's unaware of his surroundings and how people view him, and he is also kind of a genius. But O somehow actually becomes more than a one-note joke throughout the movie. Rihanna is so-so as Tip, but it is a little overkill having just about every song on the soundtrack performed by her.
Yeah.
The logic of this movie is pretty stupid, even for an animated film about aliens, and the humor is probably more miss than hit, at least with the things that we didn't see in the trailer. It is colorful, though. The design of the boobs is fun, and the messages are nice, but there's not a lot of complexity here. It's about as basic as an animated movie can get. I give it a very average C. Justin?
I can't honestly call Home the world's most original animated film, but where it lacks in that department, it makes up for with charm and fun. I am on the same board with you, Dan, with Jim Parsons. I think he's a great voice talent with this movie. I do wish he could branch out a little bit more, but this isn't the first time he's done this, and usually it's just variations of the Sheldon Cooper character. And I honestly don't think Rihanna has much of a future as an actress. But then again, when your only thing to compare to is Battleship, maybe I'm being a little too harsh. But honestly, I think she and Parsons do have fun together and keep the story lively, adding in a little humor where appropriate, not always knocking him flat, but keeping it lively, and adding a strong sense of heart. Though honestly, what I did enjoy most about this film was its sense of seriousness. It really hit some of the more dramatic beats that gave audiences more sense of the ethical side of the movie that I enjoyed. It's not perfect, but it's not bad either. I leave it with a B-.
All right. Joe, how about for you?
I pretty much agree with you guys. I think, for me, the best thing about the movie was I thought the animation was really nice. I thought it was very colorful, very good to look at. I think it's definitely something that the kids can enjoy. I think that most of the family could kind of sit along with, too. Ivy Parsons does have, I think, some good voice talent. It definitely isn't branching out, but I did like the character. I liked his growth throughout the movie. Like you said, Dan, the story is pretty basic, but it was still a good progression. Can't really say it was bad per se, but I think the hook for the movie really was Rihanna and her soundtrack, and like, I mean, of course the music's fine, but it just bugged me, and I felt like her line reads really varied. Like some of the dialogue was okay, but some of the acting was questionable.
Can I comment on that?
You can comment.
I wouldn't have been so irritated by it if they hadn't made it so painfully obvious that it's basically Rihanna playing like teenage version of herself. Like there's this one scene that really, really annoyed me where they're in the car talking and it's like, oh, well, when I was a teenager on Barbados. Gee, thanks, Rihanna.
Yeah, that line really stuck out to me.
Yeah, that stuck out to me as well.
What an average teenager from Barbados. That was kind of interesting. But no, I thought the Boov were okay. I don't know. I thought that the beginning of the movie had so much of that fast-paced, ridiculous action, just keep the kids' attention. And I liked it more when the story slowed down a bit.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I feel like the movie generally got better as it went along. And I think the thing that kind of saved it for me was there's kind of a twist that adds to the message, which is towards the end of the movie, which is pretty obvious, but the way they did it was still creative, and it's really indicative. As Justin said, the dramatic moments are handled well, and that last like part of the third act of the movie really was just incredibly reminiscent of just the best of science fiction encounters. I think there was some really good stuff there. I just wish that the rest of the movie had been like that. There's definitely some potential. But for that last, 15, 20 minutes, which is really good, I'm going to leave this one with a B- as well.
Okay. I admit a C might be a little harsh.
Not really.
But, I just feel like I didn't think it was very funny. I mean, the funniest parts we certainly saw in the trailer, which, DreamWorks really has a history of that. I mean, I felt the same way about the Penguins of Madagascar.
I'll tell you what, I feel like a lot of the jokes that I was supposed to laugh at, I didn't, but I laughed at other things. Like, they're trying to escape, and he runs into the store, and it's all lamps. And the name of the store,
yes, that was good.
There's a couple.
That was good.
I liked a lot of the little more subtle, clever.
I like the names of the Slurpee flavors.
Yeah, and how they're like, haha, bust a line. Like, yeah, that's
good.
corny, but it's funny.
Yeah.
I liked it was more like, ha ha, as opposed to, gut bursting.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I liked it when it was trying to be smart. When it was trying to be too toddler friendly, I felt like it was.
And I felt like there was a lot of that.
And that's the stuff I didn't like. Most of the beginning of the movie, just slow down. You're just throwing everything at the screen. I know why, but like I said, once it slows down and builds, the story gets better.
Right.
But when it becomes more serious, if they had actually taken it more seriously, the movie could have been a lot better.
Is it just me, or does this movie basically follow the exact same premise as The Host, but does it about 8 times better?
That's actually...
I didn't think about that, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not too far off.
Yeah.
Aliens invade, don't realize they're invading, and sort of learn the error of their ways over the course of the movie.
That's the basic plot, yeah.
Yeah,
that
is.
Yeah, it's better than The Host there, I guess.
It's definitely better than The Host.
Well,
I'm sure you were trying to get that out of
sure.
your head, Dan.
Yeah, I honestly,
Hey.
I never would have thought of that. I forgot about that movie completely.
I forget until you mention it.
Even when going over all of the lousy young adult adaptations last week, we were talking
Forgot
about
about it.
Insurgent. I said Vampire Academy. I said The Mortal Instruments. The Host is just out of my mind completely.
It's really not bad.
Probably not a bad thing.
I felt like Steve Martin was kind of wasted here. I think the guy's funny, but he just didn't. He added nothing. It could have been played by anybody.
It could have been. Well, the thing that I was wondering, I don't know if this is good voice acting or bad. I remember Steve Martin's voice. I didn't think it was really. It didn't sound a lot like him here. I thought. I thought he was changing up his voice a bit. I didn't think he was. I didn't think it was quite as obvious.
I knew it was him, so I guess it's hard for me to comment on that.
It's hard to say because we kicked it off with a short where...
Right, Steve Martin was the main actor and the voice actor.
And I could tell it was him there, for sure. But this one, I felt like he toned down his voice a bit.
In the short, I didn't actually originally realize it was him.
Huh.
Until it popped up and I was like, okay, I can more and more see that this is...
I thought it was really obvious in the short.
I think the big difference is, like you said, Dan, in the short, he's the main character. In this, he's got 7-8 minutes of screen time.
10 tops, yeah.
Yeah.
He was okay, but you're right. He didn't really add anything particular about it.
No, and I'm sorry. When the voice cast is Jim Parsons, Rihanna, Jennifer Lopez, and Steve Martin, I expect the majority of the laughs to come from Steve Martin. Apologies to Jim Parsons, but I mean, I don't think they're coming from J-Lo.
I felt like he was not supposed to. Well, the problem is
Why have him in your movie then?
Well, I don't know if it's really his fault though, because I mean, look at the material though. Ha ha. His hat is a shovel.
Is a tire, yeah.
It's not that funny anyway.
I know.
So maybe it's not necessarily his performance as is the writing. Because
you're right. His stamp on it is probably more of the
star
wacky voices and
yeah.
All right. Not too great, but it did very well at the box office, and we're going to talk later about DreamWorks themselves and a possible new Shrek movie coming out. Up next, let's talk about The Gunman, and that is with Justin.
Please explain it to me.
What exactly was going on? There was 9 different plots. Okay. 8 years ago, Jim Terrier, played by Sean Penn, was a mercenary who, while on a mission from a mysterious client, took out the Minister of Mines of the Congo and had to go into hiding. When he returns, Terrier finds himself being the target of a paid hit squad and races to find out why, all while protecting his old flame Annie, played by Jasmine Trinka, from harm. This was directed by Pierre Morel, who was the director of the original Taken, which I thought worked because it was simple and essentially knew what it was aiming for. The same can't really be said for The Gunman. Part of the reason stems from the fact that Morel just doesn't seem to know what story he wants to tell. And he throws in 3 to 4 different ones, a political thriller at some points, this fugitive on the run story, all of which are very underdeveloped. They have moments of promise, but they don't really go anywhere. For example, they introduce Javier Bardem early on in the film as a buddy of
Wasted.
Penn, who is completely thrown to the side probably less than 15-20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
Though I gotta say, I do think it got a little bit better as it went along. The action sequences, while few and very far between, I thought were interesting. And honestly, the cast is really trying to do the best with what they have. Penn's working with everything he's got despite the material. It's not enough to completely save it, but it doesn't exactly pull it down either. I leave it with a C.
Joe, how about for you?
Okay, well, it starts off, and I will admit, I was kind of interested in the premise. I thought, okay, we've got some stuff going down in Africa here, secret agents, they gotta get out, there's some kind of relationship, there's some tension, and then the movie keeps going, and more stuff happens, and yeah, basically that's it. No, really, the problem is that, like, I agree with you, Justin. The actors are trying here. Like, I think Sean Penn gave a good performance, and I was interested in these characters. I was interested to see what these characters had to offer. But the problem is, I had no idea what was going on. Mm-hmm. Like, I was trying to follow. I know vaguely I could just connect the dots and say, okay, there's some kind of conspiracy here, but nothing is established, so we don't know what the stakes are. We don't know why we should care. We don't know. And if we don't know exactly why we should care about these characters or their plight, it's really hard to get invested. If I don't know what's going on, I can't follow it. But I do agree, it's like the actors try, and there are some interesting ideas in here. Some of the action's okay, but it just feels so by the numbers because you don't know specifically what's going on, so you just kind of have to accept the general plot that you've seen in thousands of movies and kind of use that to carry it on. Just not that engaging for its 2-hour runtime or more. I'm going to leave it with the D+.
This movie is super boring. There's only 2 scenes in the entire movie that held any intrigue for me. One, it takes place pretty early on. It's where Sean Penn is volunteering and gets some unfriendly visitors, let's say. And then another one is where he goes back to his apartment and, sees that it's bugged and all that stuff. That's it. The political portion is really the only plot of the 8 or 9 plots this movie has that held any interest, and it's really barely there. Sean Penn is such a political activist in the real world. I feel like he sort of heard the basic synopsis of this and thought, oh, this will be a great political thriller.
Stepping stone.
It just is not that at all. I think he's okay, but certainly not up to his usual. I thought he was better in the 2 minutes we see him in Walter Mitty than he is in this whole movie. Idris Elba, barely in the film.
That was misadvertising.
That was disappointing.
He's like the second build on the poster. I mean, it's McConaughey and Wolf of Wall Street all over again.
Spoilers. He's barely in the movie.
He's barely in it. Javier Bardem is horrible, and I'm sorry, he has yet to show me a good non-Skyfall performance. The last 4 movies I've seen him in, he's just terrible.
Well, to
The
be fair,
Counselor, Eat, Pray, Love, Beautiful.
To be fair, those movies weren't very good.
No, I suppose that's Eat, Pray, Love was okay. I guess.
The Counselor wasn't,
The Counselor was awful.
But I don't know. I think he's just trying to kind of chew the scenery while he's there. I'll show you some early Bardem.
Yes, please do, because I mean he's famous. I assume for some reason.
You guys ever see The Dancer Upstairs?
No, I've heard about it.
It's a very good movie.
Okay.
So I mean, he can act. It's not. Skyfall wasn't a fluke.
I mean, I like No Country.
Horrible
So.
in this.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
okay, I'm sorry. I forgot No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, don't forget that.
You're right. Sugar is a great character.
Hey.
And Javier Bardem does him well.
You do a couple big ones, maybe you don't have to try them.
I'll give you that. Well, look at Elijah Wood.
Grand
point. Yeah.
Listen, the plot here makes very little sense. You guys are both right. It's incredibly hard to follow. We don't know much about these characters.
Let me ask you. Okay.
Yes.
I'm serious. Okay, he kills the Minister of Mining, has to get out for 8 years.
Yes.
Oh.
Why is no one looking for him in 8 years? I don't know.
No, it's not that. Okay, I still don't know if the organization he was working for was evil and they were trying to manipulate it so that they could just drill there more, or they're just going to like feed off of it to cause a civil war or something, whatever. Or if he was working for somebody and they were trying to prevent the minister from like stopping the rebels.
I don't know.
I don't know whether he's working for a good agency or a bad agency, or they're all going bad. I don't know. And by the way, on a side point, you haven't even given your grade yet.
It's a D.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
It's
okay.
Shades away from an F, but it's a D.
You guys want to know the part that bothered me the most is his girlfriend. Okay, they're supposedly really in love, and he just leaves after 8 years.
Oh yeah,
and then he comes back, and then they just start getting it on. I'm like, it's not that easy.
No.
It is not that easy.
No.
You just walk away after 8 years. It comes back. Oh, let's get it on. No, I just the whole section. I was like, no.
As she's almost being murdered by multiple people.
I'm just saying, like that whole
because
sex
of
scene,
him.
That exactly.
No, that's easily my least favorite scene in the entire movie.
That sex scene kept going.
It was awful.
The whole time I was thinking, no, that's not bad. This you need to work a little harder. That.
See, this to me actually, speaking of Bardem's acting history, is a lot like The Counselor.
Similar character.
I mean, which Justin also gave a C- or maybe even a C to.
C.
It made no sense. I couldn't tell you what the plot of The Counselor is. I can't tell you what the plot of this movie is. Because there's about 8 plots. I'm not sure which ones make sense, how they tie in. Why is no one looking for this guy in 8 years and all of a sudden?
Because they're cleaning house.
Yeah.
Because if they only kill the gunman, that's the only thing that matters.
Well, they were also trying to exterminate the other ones as well.
They were, but like there's.
Which I'm assuming they were doing those 8 years.
Well, the thing is, there's this line in the movie where they say, "Okay, we decided all we need to do is take out the 3 gunmen. You're the last one." So, if they just get the people that actually shot him, all the other people involved in the conspiracy don't matter.
Yes, that's
strange
correct.
movie logic.
I'm just saying
that's
that's the we have to take out the gunman, even though the gunman's the most disposable person. They just disappear for 8 years. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
They just said we shoot the guy. We just take orders. And he's just like, I don't know what we did. I got to find out. It's stupid.
Yes, it's stupid. I can't. These grades for this movie. I mean, I don't know. To me, a plot matters, and if it doesn't make any sense, I find it incredibly hard to get behind it.
In the most generic sense, it works. But if you try to think about any of the details, most of them fall apart.
That's a bit of a problem, I think.
That's a problem, but there are elements of it I like. I like some of the themes. There are some good scenes. You know, the characters seem potentially interesting. There's some decent acting. Yeah. You know, but there's some decent shots and editing. But it's like...
It wouldn't be so...
I don't think the acting's even all that good.
It wouldn't even be so bad if it wasn't for the fact that we have all these storylines. If Morello had just focused on one and really fleshed it out, he would have had an awesome action.
I agree.
movie.
Something straightforward.
Okay, so I've already said, for me, it's the political aspect of the film. What is the aspect you would have preferred them to focus on,
that's
Justin?
interesting.
I'm glad you asked that.
That's a good
I
question.
think for me, it was when he comes back and he's with the NGO and he teams up with one of the people helping out there. I was really interested to see where that was going.
Oh, yeah.
Never comes back to it at all. That was another scene that really, really frustrated me about this movie.
That's a good one.
What about for you, Joe?
Well, I like the characters. I thought Sean Penn's character was interesting because we learn that with all the shrapnel and everything, he has a disease. And, apparently this is actually causing some mental trauma. He's got some guilt. There's something there. I was interested in that.
Yeah.
But they don't go anywhere with it.
I know. That was one of my least favorite parts because it just...
Well, but tried to, and it's just they never really explored it fully.
I liked the one scene where he's talking to the bad guy, and I'm like, oh, you got a problem there. The cocky bad guy, by the way. He can just shoot you at any time. But that scene was good. There was some tension there. You look like you just want to give up now. Like, okay, this guy's got some baggage. Let's learn about this. No, I'm like, come on.
Why bother?
That seemed interesting to me. I liked that, but we don't even know the gunman. Not really.
all right, well, let's move on here. We've got It Follows next, and that is with Joe.
All right. It is an American supernatural horror film written and directed by David Robert Mitchell and starring Micah Monroe, Keira Gilchrist, and Jake Weary. The plot follows a young girl, played by Monroe, who is pursued by an indeterminate supernatural force after a sexual experience, and she finds that this being is able to follow her, and she has to prevent herself from being attacked by it, and she could pass it on by engaging in sexual acts with someone else, but if that person is killed by it, it will continue to go down the line through the past of these events. Much like The Guest, this movie is really a big throwback to 1970s and 80s John Carpenter style horror movies, and it's also really original. This movie was described to me as just kind of another ghost story, and I'm thinking, oh my god, like, don't get me wrong, ghost stories typically are the scarier horror movies if they're done well, but for all the praise this movie was getting, I'm like, I just don't really care much. But like ghost stories, I'm sorry, they've never been my favorites generally. I like a good mutant creature or a monster, but that's the sci-fi element there. But this movie is really, really good. I loved this movie. I thought the performances were great. I loved the soundtrack. The soundtrack was just amazing. I could just sit back and listen to the soundtrack. Obviously, a big factor for me, much like The Guest. This movie was fun and hokey at certain elements, but it was really, really scary to me because I really felt like this was a force that, because it was so mysterious and we didn't know much about it, that's what was so scary for me. Like, we don't really learn too much. I also found out that it's kind of an interesting commentary on STDs.
It's been thrown around. The director himself has basically said that all that stuff is just interpretation.
Whether or not it's an interpretation or not, I didn't think of it that way. I actually talked to my girlfriend about it, just describing the movie to her, and she said, sounds kind of like STDs. I'm like, you're right, that is kind of it. So it still works, I think, as a metaphor. But I really liked the actors in this movie. I thought it was shot very well. There were some minor, I could think ways you could get out of this, but realistically speaking, throwing in people thinking you're crazy and money issues, not really. So just, I don't know. Something about this movie just really, really worked for me. I think it's one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. I'm giving it an A+.
Wow, very good.
Well, early.
It's clearly a spot-on homage to 70s and early 80s horror films. It hits the tone and the music. You're absolutely right about the soundtrack. The music is it's so spot-on and so chilling. The cinematography, it all hits to the letter, complete with these decent no-name actors. I mean, I don't know these people.
The main girl, who I liked a lot, Micah, she was the girl in Labor Day that talked him into leaving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the only thing I saw her in.
Okay.
And she was in the Bling Ring, so she's moving up.
Oh, I hate the Bling
She's
Ring.
moving up. She's moving up.
But this film offers genuine chills.
I was scared.
You know, it is scary, but it's also got this creepy, disturbing atmosphere and a delightfully sick yet kind of still campy storyline.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, it hits a couple of humorous notes as well, but it doesn't try to beat you over the head with them, you know.
I appreciated some of the humor here and there. Like, I could see how it could be perceived as funny. Like, it's standing there and it's naked.
Yeah.
That should be funny. I'm scared.
Right.
I don't want this thing to be near me. But I'm like,
My big issue with the film is that it has a lot of timeline discrepancies. It wants to be set in the 70s, and it mostly is with the TVs and the phones on the wall. But some of the cars are clearly 90s cars. The one girl has this Kindle type thing in her compact. I did not know how to
feel about that.
I didn't know what that was or what was happening with that. And then also with the whole timeline, sometimes the creature is following her at a snail's pace, and sometimes
it's sprinting.
It never sprints, quote unquote. I mean, we never see it move. It never moves quicker from what we see.
Yeah, sometimes it limps quickly.
Sometimes it shows up a lot quicker. Like the one scene, she falls asleep on her car in the woods, doesn't follow her, but then they drive off to this community pool and are waiting for it for not that long.
A day,
and
maybe?
It follows. I don't even think that long.
I don't know, night.
You know? So I just... Certain things aren't established as much as I would have liked. For me, the movie is an A-.
Okay.
Really, for those issues. I mean, I don't know. I wish something could have been done. I don't know why they weren't more clear about the era.
I'll tell you what. I could... The whole pacing thing with the... I thought about that too, but it didn't really bother me because I had no idea how much time was passing.
Okay.
But for me, I thought it was just an homage to 70s stuff, not necessarily set in the 70s. Though, I will admit... I didn't understand why the cars were modern.
The cars were modern, and nobody had cell phones. So clearly it's not
supposed
set
to be
today, that's for sure. And the clothing, I mean, it's clearly supposed to be 70s, 80s.
Well, I think it was supposed to go for that feeling.
Know?
But I felt like it was supposed to be semi-modern because, I mean, she had a iPod thing.
I don't understand.
Which,
that's the
thing.
Only bit of modern technology from the last 30 years in the whole movie.
I don't have an issue with you going retro with your movie. It's just a matter of if you're going to do that, be consistent about it.
Like, look at the TVs they were watching and the TV shows that were on in that grainy... It clearly wasn't cable they were watching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was antenna TV. And the ugly yellow phone on the wall. I mean, these are 70s touches, you know. But the cars did not indicate that, and whatever that electronic thing she had.
Is that like a thing that like they were like a
don't know.
maybe
No.
like an 80s like weird thing?
No.
I don't know. Maybe.
No. She was reading a book at some point on it.
Yeah.
It's a Kindle-esque type thing. Made no sense. Justin, what did you think of It Follows?
For as much that can be said about the sad state of contemporary horror films, if nothing else, It Follows is fiendishly original. Admittedly, I don't think it's as scary as it wants to be, and the score is going to likely be of the love it or hate it type. I think there's a time and a place for hitting that, but I think when the movie's trying way too hard to hit that note, it just gets really, really out of control. But it's really got a great creep factor that honestly stuck with me well after the movie was over. But what I really did love about this movie was its pace. I think we're never anywhere too long or too early. It allows us to understand the characters in a very, very minimal amount of time and help build tension to the ultimate climax, which I have very mixed feelings about. I think there's one moment that it could have ended at least 5 minutes earlier than it should have. And then when we get to the one that it chooses to end on, I didn't know how to take it, to be honest with you.
The actual ending?
The actual ending. I didn't hate it, but I can't honestly say I loved it either. Overall, I think It Follows is proof that the horror genre is truly not dead, but it's not without its flaws. I leave it with a B+.
Oh, I love the ending. I thought it ended perfectly. I do agree. I mean, it could have probably ended at a couple of different places, but I mean, it's not like it was overstaying its welcome, so I was fine with where it ended.
I didn't want it to end because I didn't want it to be the last shot, so I think that was a good ending. Because I was like, man, I don't know. Which I think it's good. I like it when there's a little bit of ambiguity.
I do.
No. The ambiguity was not the issue for me. It was more or less
the shot or the resolution at the end.
It was more or less that the resolution was, without giving spoilers, a little bit odd to me.
Morally questionable or
sort of
hard to peg down.
Like the way I would have ended it would have probably been the final shot of the climactic showdown.
Okay. I mean, that could have been one place, yeah.
Because you still have that genuine chill factor.
You would have been a little more definitive in the conclusion, though, I think.
Yeah, I would rather they leave it more open-ended.
I know the shot you're talking about, which I thought it was going to end at too, which was a great shot. I'm like, well,
yeah, it's super creepy.
If that's cool, that's the ending. I'm okay with that because I'm not quite as worried, I guess. But I think that, the way they ended it was a little... I think it added a little more interest there.
But I am sort of with you, Justin. I don't think it's necessarily like a super scary movie. I think Joe maybe was a little more quote unquote scared than you and I were. I was more chilled by it. Like it was very like creepy and chilling.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know that there's like big discrepancies about our definitions that chilling and creepy is a type of fear. Mm-hmm. So if it gets under my skin and it sticks with me, it's better than a jump scare.
Right,
which is cheap. It scares
I hate a jump scare.
It scares me legitimately. And then I forget about it because it wasn't really that scary. The psychological factor...
Yeah, this is more something that sticks with you.
I like The Thing, because The Thing, it's not all about the monster. It's about, you don't know what's going on with the other people. You leave that movie thinking, oh, God, this thing could still be out there. And once again, interestingly enough, The Thing, ambiguity, a thing, it, ambiguity. We don't even really know what it is.
Here's the thing, though. That concept legitimately scares me. With It Follows, I'm just creeped out because it's this random person following me around.
I don't know if it's exactly a person.
Okay, it's...
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Some sort of apparition.
It's an entity... It's an entity
demonic...
shaped as a
It's a demonic
taking the form
of
a human being. Could be someone you know, could be someone you don't know. I'm creeped out, but I wouldn't say I'm terrified.
Well, you should be, because if you sleep and you forget about it because it's not a big deal, you are done. So, I mean, if you're not really scared, that's fine. But you're like some people in the movie,
which is surprising. But
yeah, apparently, well, it does have trouble getting into places. I mean, in all honesty, it's like I don't know if I want to like describe it, but like the conclusion I came to myself is like it's some sort of weird combination between a zombie
and a poltergeist.
I was going to say succubus, actually, not to spoil anything, but I mean,
In one instance.
It doesn't really have that much trouble getting into places. It throws a brick through a window and then it walks in. Or, like in my example, she falls asleep in the woods. She's out in the clear open.
too easy, I guess.
And it doesn't follow her there. I mean, we don't know. She could have only been in sleep for a couple hours, whatever.
We don't know.
We don't know. It's true. But I don't know. I wouldn't say it has trouble getting into places. It seems to...
It's resourceful.
Yeah, it is pretty resourceful, I feel like.
Well, it's like you said, it's slow, but it's not dumb.
Yeah, that is true. Well, we have our first A+ of 2015.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
So, Joe, good job. I'm glad you enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it was
Bravo.
awesome.
All right, well, up next we've got Do You Believe? This is a Christian drama in the vein of films where there are many separate stories that intertwine into one, reminiscent of the creator's last project, the box office success God's Not Dead. Now, this one stars your favorite TV and film stars of 1987, Ted McGinley, Lee Majors, Sean Astin, Sybil Shepherd, Mira Sorvino, many others. Unlike God's Not Dead, though, which had one very front and center plot,
And awesome person.
and a great person as well from your past, and some minor subplots surrounding it, Do You Believe has a more balanced slate, though some of the same type of characters as you would imagine. The pastor questioning his faith, the doctor and the lawyer who do not believe in the good word, a young mother about to give birth, brothers from a street gang, a kindly elderly man risks his own health to save a homeless woman, and like always, there are 2 or 3 characters you could lift out completely and not miss a thing. But what sets Do You Believe apart from much of the religious fare we've reviewed in the last year and a half doing this show is that it is PG-13, and that allows it to be a little bit more loose with a thriller-type aspect, including an intense accident sequence, some gang violence, some gunplay. It definitely crams a message down our throats, obviously, but I think it's done in a way that actually stirs conversation instead of giving it to us in black and white. Now, this will be like nails on a chalkboard to Justin, I'm sure. I leave Do You Believe with a C+. Justin?
It's not exactly praise, though.
No, but if he gives it any higher than a D, I mean, I'll give you $1 million.
I will be honest, I am
come on.
impressed by the PG-13, though.
I was as well. I didn't realize it was until they started shooting people, and I was like, this is not quite heaven is for real here.
It would be the first time they've done that.
I mean, Left Behind was PG-13.
Well, for as much as I despised Pure Flix's God's Not Dead, I could at least give pity points on interesting subject matter and having some coherent thoughts in its head. Do You Believe just seems to have watched far better movies, Crash comes to mind, and ripping them off hoping no one will notice. The acting is weak, every single storyline is about as hokey and it's sometimes arguably racist and underdeveloped as one can expect, and the whole thing just drags on aimlessly. You are completely spot on when you said that there's at least 3 different subplots that can easily be excised, and they take up a good 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes of the movie. Overall, it's just a bloated, preachy mess that should have never been made. I give it an F.
And there it is. No, I mean, I knew. Come on. I'm sure you think my C+ is ridiculous. I have to say, the accident scene got to me. I don't think the acting is horrible here. Now, I will say, Sybil Shepherd has gone downhill. I'm sure you're not very familiar, Justin.
No,
but,
go on, though.
Moonlighting,
Oh, okay.
where she got her start. She had her own sitcom for about 4 years in the 90s.
Just to deter any possible arguments, let me just ask, since I did not see the film.
Yes.
The thing I'm most curious about, how was Sam in it? How was Sean Astin in the film?
Well, unfortunately, he plays probably the most generic character, which is the non-believer doctor.
Of course.
So...
And hands down the most moronic, lazy, clearly don't know anything about hospitals' interpretation of the medical facility
great.
I have ever seen put on film.
Wow.
To the point that it's horrific to watch.
No, I don't go that far.
I was in pain watching those scenes.
It's supposed to be bad hospital stuff.
But he is unfortunately probably one of the weakest characters in the movie.
There's another guy that just doesn't care anymore.
Well, he's obviously got a Christian
following.
belief because he was in Mom's Night Out as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
he pops up in those things.
Yeah, so obviously this is something he believes in, and so I guess
Great.
in his non-believer role here. He's
But-
trying to send the
But
message.
it sounds like he's picking bad projects, though. He knows better movies. I have to think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I thought Mom's Night Out was all right. I think I give that a D+.
I think he's considering it like charity.
For a Christian movie, D+, I feel like it's all
I
right.
mean, you're right. I was like, jeez. But no, okay, sure, for charity, you want to support the cause. Hey, I'm Sean Astin. I'll help bring people to your movie because I believe in this stuff. Great. But, I mean, you'd think he'd pick a little closer. I mean, like, just stop doing people favors. You were in Lord of the Rings. That's a good movie.
But again, I mean, I'll bring up Elijah Wood again. I mean, we
But
talked
no.
about this last week. Yes, he did Lord of the Rings too, and now he's in these awful movies.
But Elijah Wood, I think, is having fun with it because at least they're trying to go with campiness. I feel okay. Maybe Sean Astin has a better goal.
Yeah, they're two different
But-
ways, I guess, of doing it. Sean Astin obviously has a more personal attachment here. Yeah.
But he doesn't. But I feel like these movies aren't as entertaining. I mean, like Grand Piano at least was like hilarious.
True. True.
I'm never gonna watch these.
No, you're not. But guess
Nor
why?
do you need to.
Because you don't care about the message.
But I doubt that people that actually should care. We've talked about it before. They deserve better movies. They deserve better movies.
Easily.
If you want to do a Christian story, fine. But give a crap about it. Put some real effort into it. I'm sorry.
Listen, okay, but at the same time, unfortunately, you didn't get to see it, so you can't be the go-between here.
I've seen enough.
I gave a lot of these movies we've talked about in the D+ range. This, I thought, added something to the mix. I enjoyed the gang subplot. I'm assuming that's what was racist because they were all black, right, Justin?
No, the entire thing felt like, oh, this is how Christians view X. This is how Christians view gangsters. This is how Christians view...
Hey.
I don't think it's as black and white as that, to be honest.
This is how Christians view doctors. It's like, oh my God,
Honestly,
do you even talk to people?
That just sounds like bad writing more than
It's
Yeah, I mean,
horrible writing.
I don't... but you're attacking... this is how Christians view X. This is how maybe a bad screenwriter... I mean, to me it wasn't as bad as it hit you, but I don't think necessarily the religious aspect plays into how they wrote certain characters. That's all.
I mean, if you got an agenda to push, sure, but I mean, all movies push agendas. We've talked about that.
Right.
It's just a matter of how well you can hide it.
Correct.
Fair point.
And still hit the message home in a more subconscious way. That's what most movies do.
I mean, I think when we see a lot of these movies, they are watered down. God's Not Dead was PG. Nothing really happened in that movie except at
One
the
really
end.
bad accident.
Yeah,
Let me give you-
one bad accident.
It's not
affecting one person.
It just so happens it's not the fact they're Christian movies. It's
Right, that's my point.
It's the fact that a lot of the Christian movies are in the same vein as Addicted, where they have like somebody with a huge agenda and the agenda just dwarfs everything else.
Yes.
And
I would agree with that.
The quality of everything else goes down because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. I mean, they just say, we are going to sell the Christian idea. People are going to come anyway because they believe.
Right.
So we can just throw something together, maybe get a few other people interesting, and then they'll go to church. I don't know.
Yes,
But that's the problem.
I don't think this movie is necessarily for non-believers.
But why shouldn't
but why
it be
does it
better?
exist?
Why couldn't it be
Why
better?
couldn't it be like a direct-to-DVD thing or something?
Last Temptation of Christ or something. There's a great Christian movie. You're directly telling the story. We talked about it, Justin. That's a great movie.
Agreed.
Of course, obviously,
True.
big director.
But,
big
right, we've
screeners.
talked about this before, too, in the budget in these projects. You get a couple of quote-unquote, bigger name stars. Mira Sorvino, she won an Oscar. And,
Yeah, it's decent. You got some decent people there. But why is it, though, that they always seem to have like the worst quality writing and directing?
I don't know.
Why can't we find more talent in these
don't know.
people? I know that there are people of huge beliefs that can act and direct.
Correct.
I know they're
Easily.
obviously out there. They're in Hollywood. Some of them,
This is not that big.
I'm
not
sure.
that hard a task.
I'm sure one of them would do it for free if they believed. I'm just tired of seeing the bad stuff, and I haven't even seen this, but I'm sure
I know.
I'd probably be in between you guys. I'm gonna say I gave it a D+ if I hadn't seen it. Probably would have been.
Yes, honestly, knowing how you felt about some of the other ones, I think that's probably
Hey,
correct.
I thought A Heaven Is For Real was actually pretty decent.
Yes, I think we all agree that
That was
on
better than the norm.
better end of the
Because
scale
that
is certainly
had
Heaven Is
some
For
better
Real.
writing, some better acting, and better directing. There was more potential there. That was actually like a good movie to me.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them are not even close to that. So it's like,
Not even remotely.
Well, and I think Justin, a lot of times you go into this with blinders on too, because I do think that this can stir more conversation than God's Not Dead.
I'm not sure if I agree with that.
Well,
I mean,
good people die in this movie. And I think that stirs conversation because a huge aspect in religious conversation is, well, if God's here, why does he kill good people?
There's that debate also in God's Not Dead.
Not really.
The bad guy gets killed by God.
The bad guy gets killed by God.
But yet his entire motivation is because he lost a loved one, and ergo blames God.
No,
that is
Justin,
literally his entire motivation.
Justin, the thing about that is, though, it doesn't matter because you and I even agreed it was great. God apparently hates non-believers. Excuse me. Just kill Kevin Sorbo. Hercules is done. And I mean, that's the message of God's Not Dead. It's like, you know what? Your whole debate was interesting, but guess what? You left us to a trade. You're done. And it's like...
Here, I think it is more complex than that. I know you don't agree, and that's fine.
The Greek pantheon versus the Christian one.
Well, I just... whatever.
I
do can't win them all, can't win none. I mean...
He's like, you know what? Like,
I'd like to have them win one.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I would, honestly.
He's like, you know what?
You really wouldn't.
To be fair, he gave it a C+. I was not expecting an F. I was thinking
I was expecting a D or a D-. I honestly wasn't expecting an F either because I thought it was better than God's Not Dead, but we have other movies to do. Up next, we're going to do our home media moment, and that is Rudderless. Justin?
Sam, played by Billy Crudup, is a man grieving over the loss of his son, who was responsible for a school shooting that besmirched his family, and his girlfriend Kate, played by Selena Gomez. However, when Sam discovers a box of his son's demos, he finds a way to reconnect with his departed son and forms a band with an unknowing Quentin, played by Anton Yelchin, to perform them. For a feature film debut from director William H. Macy, I was really impressed that he chose to tackle such a sensitive subject matter and handle it in this honest and realistic way. Crudup's character takes a bit to get behind, and even in some of the later moments he's not always the most likable, but the film progresses at a rate that feels believable and lets the interplay with other characters reveal more about him. It doesn't always work. Gomez is another losing streak.
Yeah.
Which is really noticeable when her character becomes a really big deal in the end of the second on to the third act. But the performances are good, the story never loses interest, and the music is relatively catchy. I'll never look at the wheels on the bus go round and round the same way ever again. Honestly, for feature film debut, not bad. I give it a B.
Yeah, I mean, Macy's directorial debut is decent, though he really has no, specific vision behind the lens. It's not that it's directed poorly, he just doesn't really add anything of note. I do think it's paced well, I'll give him that. But Rudderless succeeds because of its story, its solid acting, and great music. Even when the script is a little bit more manipulative or rings a touch false, I don't think it's as good as last year's musician drama, Begin Again, but I do think it's a worthy addition to this genre. I give it a B as well. Joe?
Well, it's interesting. You guys kind of echoed a lot of my thoughts about the movie. I feel like the general story works, but it's kind of in this very predictable cookie-cutter kind of way. You can see everything falling into place. Definitely something he's comfortable with, but it's not to say it's bad. I mean, I think the subject matter is heavy, and you're right. Sometimes it feels a little manipulative. It's a little obvious, but at the same time, there's such genuine heart behind it. It's kind of hard not to get emotional, especially at that last scene. I mean, come on. Yeah. That really worked. So that's tough, definitely. I did think the performances were good. I did like the interplay with Crudup and Yeltsin's character.
Yeah.
I liked their bond.
Good chemistry.
Especially in the beginning. Some of their lines were funny, just how he slowly built up that friendship. That was pretty good. And Gomez wasn't great, but the character provided some interesting twists there towards the end to kind of mix things up a little bit. I was actually just thinking, this is pretty much just Oscar Isaac Begins Again.
Yeah, basically.
It's just, I just saw, what's up with this force of just these struggling musicians trying to get their message out. It's becoming another thing, but actually, it's funny. I'm with you guys. I give it a B.
Interesting.
It's not quite as good as either of those movies.
Correct.
But it's a decent addition to that sort of subgenre.
Yeah.
Of the struggling guitarist alt rock, and I have to say though, I really like the music. I think
the music is great.
I feel like the music was really genuine and original. I'm like, well, if that's the main focus of your story, and I really like the music, that's gonna be a massive.
Well, and I think that's something that worked for you and I very well in Begin Again, is also Joe,
and for Llewyn Davis.
And we all love Llewyn Davis,
but for me, if the music is so integral to these characters, if you could provide some good music that actually really sells you that.
Absolutely.
That's a big factor.
Yeah.
You know, I just wish that it was like still a little hokey at some points.
Yeah.
It's like it's not like over there, but you can just. It's just like it doesn't.
I think
quite...
when he's trying a little too hard to throw in like these comedic subplots, it loses a little bit of its steam.
I mean, I liked it though. I mean, like I thought their bond was decent, like the whole father son sort of thing. I liked it, you know.
The Selena Gomez thing, I don't really understand, because when I heard she was in it, I thought, okay, well, I don't like her as an actress. She hasn't made a good movie yet, but I mean, I like some of her songs. I mean, obviously she's probably heavily auto-tuned, but you know, I like some of her music, so I thought, okay, well, maybe she's singing. She doesn't sing in this movie. Why have a Selena Gomez in your musical movie if she doesn't sing? Because she can't act.
No, she can't.
You know what I mean? That's not her strong suit. She's pretty.
Macy have a daughter that likes her music and said, hey, will you
Maybe.
help
I don't
advertise
know.
my directorial debut?
It could be.
I mean, you know, I think she gave it her all. It wasn't that impressive, but I mean, I feel like she was actually trying.
Selena Gomez's all is like,
Nah. She's not that great.
Probably one of those, like, I want to flex my dramatic chops rather than...
Hey, it didn't bother me that much. Like, she's not great. She's the weakest part, but she's in it so little, and she's trying. She is genuinely trying.
I liked what her character had to offer the film,
but the
delivery
delivery was a bit...
No, I just wish they had gotten someone better than her.
I agree. I do agree. I mean, she's not, like, my least favorite, but she's never been in a movie I've liked until, I mean, this is the first one I've ever given a positive to.
She's barely in it.
Let alone like an F or a D, most of them. But she is barely in it, you're right. She shows up at the beginning and she shows up towards the end for some plot development.
Yeah.
And then sort of goes away again. Mm-hmm. But, Macy has his stamp on it. He's got Felicity Huffman, his wife, in the movie. He plays a small role as the barkeep. I thought it worked for what he did with it, and I do like the story a lot.
Yeah, the story's good.
Yeah, the story is, I think, easily the best part. Well, the music as well.
Yes.
All right, well, before we move into our triple feature here of the older films, we're going to talk about a couple of news items here. As we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Home, DreamWorks, they have just one movie coming out this year, and that is Home. They've had 2 to 3 movies each of the last few years, and they've dialed it back because of the performance of some of those, like Turbo and The Penguins of Madagascar, which disappointed. But now we have word that there may be a Shrek 5 in the works, which is obviously DreamWorks' by a mile most popular franchise. And they've already got Puss in Boots 2 in the works, which is coming out in December of 2018.
Wow.
So we're still almost 4 years away from that. It's called Puss in Boots 2, 9 Lives and 40 Thieves. So, first of all, just to talk about Puss in Boots for a second, I feel like with the animated movies, you want to get them out quicker than every 5-6 years. Puss in Boots was 2013, 2012?
2012, I think.
Yeah, 2012. So at this point, you're looking 6 years in the future. What's the point of that? And then Shrek at least has a more popular following than just the Puss in Boots character. But even at that point, Shrek 5 won't be out until like 2020, maybe 2021. I mean, what's the point?
Here's my biggest issue with Shrek 5. Shrek 4 wrapped everything up.
Yes, it did.
What is the point of bringing him back other than to make money?
And was good. Shrek the Third was awful, and Shrek 4 was pretty decent. I mean, I thought.
I mean, there's...
Admittedly, I didn't see...
on that one.
I saw probably 95% of Shrek 4.
General consensus is...
It's not Shrek 1
It's better than 3.
Yeah.
But yes, obviously it's not 1 or 2.
It's not 1 or 2, but it does what it needs to do, and it does wrap everything up. My personal opinion, get Puss in Boots 2 out quicker. Do another spin-off. I've been pushing for the Gingy movie for about 10 years now, so...
It'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. Joe, what do you think of this?
Well, the article I read was that they were kind of planning on like just toying around with the Shrek 5 for a while anyway, but now they're actually trying to get it out sooner. So I think they're actually going to bring it in a couple years earlier.
Okay, see, the article I read, which was dated 2 days ago, said 2019 or 2020 at the earliest.
I just read one that was posted today. It was just today. So that's why.
So maybe they're talking about changing that.
They said that I think they're going to try and get it out. My guess would be either before Puss in Boots 2, which I think would kind of make sense to get more interest in that, or like right after Puss in Boots 2.
Okay.
So it might be 2018, 2019.
Okay, I guess that's possible. But still, you're looking, more than close to a decade at that point.
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where Shrek has enough of a fan base, it'll attract some attention, it might bring in some money, but I only saw the first two, which I love, and I heard 3 and 4 weren't good. So, and Puss in Boots I heard was okay, but like I've never...
Puss in Boots is pretty good.
I never had
it.
any real... That's all I hear. That's the best I hear. And I just never had real... I love Shrek, but I never really had an interest after that point. So, I mean, obviously, if it's out now and I'm still reviewing movies, I'll see Shrek 5, but if not, I might not see it. So, and that's my interest. I'm not the most hardcore Shrek fan, but I'm not sure if it's going to bring in the biggest bucks.
To me, I just feel like they, and Pixar as well, has found this like little niche of producing TV specials around the holidays. You have Shrek the Halls, you have the Monsters and Aliens Halloween, you've got Toy Story Terror. Why don't they keep doing that? Because you can pump those out quicker. As long as the people are on board, because Tom Hanks and Tim Allen do, the Toy Story ones, and they got all the other people from Shrek to do that. Why don't you keep doing those? Kung Fu Panda, I think, maybe even has one.
Yep, they do.
Because I feel like you can captivate the audience a little more easily doing that. You can still make money off the DVD sales and, by selling it to the networks and stuff.
True.
And that way you buy yourself some time so that when you want to bring out the next movie, you have some build-up to it.
Well, that's true, too. If you do want to do a Shrek 5, make a Shrek special every 2 years.
Keep the interest
Keep
alive.
rerunning the old ones, too. And you're right, then the interest is peaked. Because I don't get a kid's movie 10 years after the fact doing the sequel. Look at the Ice Age movies. They're mostly terrible, but they at least release them every couple of years, so they can keep the fan base interested.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, by the time Shrek 5's come out, it's going to be like 2 decades after the first movie.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's a long time to kind of get the same consistent cast and everything.
And it's a weird time frame because it's not long enough so that people that were kids when the first Shrek was out were bringing their kids. By that point, people from the first Shrek era will be like 18.
Like if you want to remake the Shrek movies, wait till 2030 or 2035.
Exactly.
And then you'll be like, now we have kids. Now we can be like, hey, get into Shrek, and they'll watch the old ones and then boost those sales.
Exactly.
But you're right, it's kind of in the weird in-between stage.
Yeah, it's in an odd sort of placement. All right, well, we're going to get into our triple feature of older films now to close the show, and we kick that off with new classic, Philomena. This is based on the nonfiction book The Lost Child of Philomena Lee by journalist Martin Sixsmith. And this mostly dramatic film centers around Judi Dench as Philomena Lee, who was forced to give her son up for adoption when he was young and has spent 50 years searching for him. Steve Coogan plays the journalist himself, who, out of work, is looking for a subject for a book when Philomena's daughter approaches him at a party and suggests her mother's story. He meets with Philomena and is drawn to her immediately, and her story, so they begin their search. Directed by Stephen Frears, whose films include one of my favorites, High Fidelity, and one of Joe's favorites, Hero, Philomena is a story with a fantastic pair of lead characters, an incredibly engaging story, and Dench and Coogan have a really great back and forth. And what's interesting about the film is that it's sort of genre house between heartbreaking drama, road trip comedy, and religious commentary, and yet it all flows together seamlessly. I originally gave this movie an A-, as I felt that I wanted more about Martin's background and his issues grappling with religion, because it never really gets explained. But honestly, on the second run, I'm not sure if his character even needs to reveal that to us, so much as I just really wanted to know. So for me, I actually bump it up, and I'm with you gentlemen on your original grades anyway. The film is an A. Joe?
Really, you said it best. I think this movie flows by really well. I think Judi Dench, I've seen her in some things, but I mostly know her as M. I think she gives just a great performance here. And Coogan as well, just also really good stuff.
Great drama from him.
Great drama. Yeah. Usually more comedy, but he can take the dramatic chops well. I think they have really great chemistry. I was really invested in the story. The only real negative I had was, ironically, I just wanted more about that. Like, I thought there was more backstory we could have gotten, just expand to maybe make it a little meatier, because I felt like it didn't quite push it far enough. Like, it covers a lot of ground, like you said, but it feels almost just a teensy bit too safe. Almost like it's just to Oscar bait a little bit, like, we'll push the envelope, but we'll still kind of be happy enough.
Reel it in.
Despite the subject matter. Just a teeny bit.
I can see that.
That's why I agree it's an A, but it's not quite an A+.
Justin?
I think this one's really interesting on second viewing in terms of how we view these characters. Obviously, we talked Alan Partridge last season, which we all really liked, but was far more of a Coogan comedic performance. And obviously, this season we talked Second Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, where Dench is in a far more dramatic performance. But I think what's really interesting is seeing these actors very much out of their element and making it work. Particularly on Dench's side, who goes from naive to silly to just jaw-droppingly powerful in the final act that honestly does far more to convey forgiveness and understanding than anything Pure Flix Entertainment has released. And I think honestly, it's a film that's likely going to anger people, but it's movies like these that shouldn't make for easy viewing, should honestly pose big questions. Does it perhaps do a little bit of Oscar baiting? Maybe, but I don't necessarily think that it turns it too far away from being a fantastic movie. I still stand by my A.
I don't think this is a movie that angers people. I didn't get that sense from it, just because of what they're saying about the church and stuff.
Nuns and all that.
Yeah, I mean...
But, I mean, it's based on a true story.
And I know that
it did happen.
Stuff like that did happen back in the day. So it's not like, And
it's not like anyone's really condoning it now. They're just saying it happened 50 years ago. So, I mean, I don't see this as being that polarizing a film.
Maybe it made people a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that and the fact that, sometimes Six Smith's own philosophies might be a little touchy-feely in terms of how he views the whole matter. And
just a little bit. But, I mean,
I'm not saying it's going to, infuriate,
Well, that's why I sort of wanted more of the background on that, just to sort of get a fuller picture, but I don't know if it needs it, honestly.
Maybe a little bit, a little time on some backstory or something would have maybe solidified it a bit more. But it works very well. I mean...
And the chemistry between these two, you don't expect it. You know?
No.
First of all, they're
polar opposites.
Decades apart. Yeah. They're polar opposites. Not just the actors themselves, but the characters have a good chemistry, I think, with each other. Mm-hmm. You know?
And what I think is so awesome about this film is both actors are ready, willing, and able to play off each other even when they're out of their element.
They're game.
Mm-hmm.
They are completely 100% game.
Which, I mean, I think is unsurprising. I think Steve Coogan really is kind of go for broke. Now, we don't see him being dramatic too often, that's true. But, I mean, I think he certainly goes more for broke in his comedic performances than he needs to here.
I think what is really awesome about Coogan in this movie is he's totally okay with letting Dench just shine in these more sillier moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get some of the laughs.
And not try to sneak in and not trying to sneak in some random pun.
He's a straight man.
Yeah, he really is kind of the straight man in this movie, which we really never see from him. And we don't really know Judi Dench to be much of a cut up. She has her moments, I guess.
She has a few, dry English wit here, a little here and there, but not like too much of that.
No. So you're right. It is interesting to see them playing off of each other and also out of their element at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joe, you gave us your pick this week for old classic, and that was American Psycho.
American Psycho is a 2000 American psychological thriller comedy film co-written and directed by Mary Herron and based on Bret Easton Ellis's 1991 novel of the same name. It stars Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, Willem Dafoe, Jared Leto, Josh Lucas, and Reese Witherspoon, so Dan can add that onto the list. Patrick Bateman, played by Mr. Bale, is a wealthy investment banker living in Manhattan in the late 1980s. His life revolves around dining at trendy restaurants while keeping up appearances for his fiancée, played by Reese Witherspoon, Evelyn, and for his circle of equally wealthy and shallow associates, most of whom he greatly dislikes. However, he also leads a secret life as a serial killer, which no one seems to care or notice him as his identity becomes more and more of a conflicted point. I think this movie offers a lot of really dark criticism just about consumerism in 80s society, with a lot of those strong cutbacks to add to the atmosphere, using the music and the styles of the clothing and whatnot. And I think that it also really showcases Christian Bale just giving a great performance here as Bateman, being this really cold, calculating character, but also with a very sick sense of humor that really makes him stand out. I mean, he's not really likable, but he's so interesting that you can't really look away. You kind of want to see what he's going to do next. And it is interesting because as the film goes on, you do learn that there is something possibly human about this guy, which is hard to believe. It's almost like the world around him is so dark that he's almost a product of it. And this has been a wide debate about various things in regards to his character and society as a whole, which is also a big part of the novel as well. I think that a lot of the satire works. I think a lot of the humor works for sure. And it's also still very disturbing and scary for me as a thriller. I mean, I know some people perceive it as a comedy, and there's definitely comedic scenes, but I've always looked at it as something more serious, personally. The only real negative for me is that I thought that the ending, it does leave you with a good punch, but how we get there is a bit hard to discern because it seems like things kind of blow out of proportion, and then there's the whole debate about whether it's some kind of dream sequence or it's actually happening. And that always kind of bugs me because we don't really know. And that I do like the actual ending, but that last part there is a bit disheveled for me. I think it's a very well-made movie. I think it's well-directed and written, and there's a lot of really deep, complicated stuff going on here. I'm going to leave it with an A.
Justin, how about for you?
There's a cult movie that I have one of my biggest love-hate relationships with. It's probably American Psycho. Make no mistake, this is quite possibly some of Bale's best method acting I've seen him do, and I think it truly does showcase his commitment to the roles that he plays, offering up several entertaining moments for dark humor. However, my biggest issue with this movie, much like its source material from Bret Easton Ellis, is the nihilism. I don't regret watching it a second time, but I just don't have a burning desire to watch it again because there's honestly no point to it. American Psycho is worth a watch, and I think it has things to say. It's just none of which go anywhere. In a odd yet respectful manner, I leave with a B-.
So basically, you just don't like what the movie's about because the whole theme is kind of about nihilism, which is fine if you don't like that. But that's literally the whole point of the movie is a very nihilistic attitude. It's very dark, and it's not necessarily going to make everybody like it for sure. I mean, but that seems like a weird. I mean, if that's your personal preference,
here's the thing. Here's the thing, Joe.
Which is fine. I mean, that's fine.
Up until the final moments of the movie, it's tackling all these heavy things.
Yeah.
And then says in its final moments, none of this matters. It's all irrelevant.
Well, that's kind of up to your interpretation, though. I think it matters a lot, actually. He doesn't, maybe the author.
All right. Dan, I'm going to go so I can include myself in this conversation.
Sorry.
I do apologize.
That's okay. It's just an interesting conversation I want to be a part of. But the movie is disturbing and bizarre. There's no doubt about that. I don't really see it as much of a comedy. I'm more with you, Joe, on that. I think it's definitely more of a thriller.
There are funny parts.
Yeah, there's humorous moments. But I think in general, I mean, this is my first time watching it. I viewed it as a thriller,
the dark psychological
thriller, yeah. I'll be honest. Bale actually does not give my favorite performance here of his. And the reason is he makes some interesting choices with the character, but I don't really agree with all of them. Justin, you pointed this out as we were watching it. In one particular scene, and then I kept noticing it, he really goes like Jim Carrey, like The Mask, some of those early Jim Carrey roles. And it sort of took me out of it when he would do that because it was very over the top. And I get what they were going for, but and maybe if Justin didn't say Jim Carrey, I might not have like super picked up on it. Mm-hmm. But it really is like a very Carrey-esque sort of delivery that sort of bothered me. But the script is so good here. The way this character is written is so over the top. It's something we rarely see in mainstream movies. It's sort of, Tarantino-y. You could see this character maybe in one of his movies. But it's not your typical movie character, even for a thriller, I feel like. I wish Witherspoon was in it more. I wish Jared Leto was in it more. But it wasn't meant to be in order to serve the story. So I can accept that. I give it an A-. I'm not quite there with you, Joe, but Justin, I'm surprised about the B-. I really am. So let's keep that conversation going.
Well, according to Rotten Tomatoes, some people have problems with the delivery of some things.
Okay.
But generally, this movie is highlighted for Bale's performance, which is generally considered one of his best. It's my second favorite.
Okay.
And
yeah, I'm in the minority there. I can accept that.
And the screenplay, which everybody says is brilliant.
The screenplay is phenomenal. I don't know that it doesn't matter though.
I mean, well, what Justin I think is saying is like the whole Well, the whole
What
theme,
what happens at the end?
the theme of the movie is kind of, based on some things I've read about it, it seems like generally the perception of the character is, okay, this society, people don't matter to him.
Mm-hmm.
He sees them as objects, but he wants to fit in. He wants to kind of align himself as a person, but he can't because he can't connect because he doesn't feel it matters. He doesn't feel he matters. That's the character's perspective. That's a thematic perspective the author's going for. Sure.
Sort of.
Kind of. That's at least one of the ways you can do it. But I don't think that necessarily means the movie itself does not matter. I mean, they wouldn't put so much effort into it to take this out. If you want to take it as nihilism, that's one way to look at it. But
It is nihilism. There's not a question.
yes, but you can interpret it a different way. You can make it something else.
Well,
Hence,
the
movies.
same way you can argue that It Follows is about the AIDS virus or an STD.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean you're right, but
It doesn't make it invalid either, Justin.
no.
So, I mean, if you didn't like that, that's fine. But, just because the message is nihilistic doesn't mean I perceive it as being entirely nihilistic. Like, I could see the character as being someone who's obviously very tortured. He sees things as nothing matters and materialism's all that matters. People don't matter. But I don't believe that. I can leave the film saying, I don't believe that. I see this character as dark. He's suffering. It is scary. It offers some interesting ideas that would be disturbing, get under your skin.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm entirely affected by it. I mean, I can leave it saying, a little nihilistic, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't necessarily say it's completely nihilistic.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. This is another classic case of, can an ending ruin a movie? Oh, yes, it can. Acting, pretty solid. Writing, up until the ending, really, really good. Cinematography, not everything works as well as it should, but I'm genuinely on board. Then comes the ending where we have a really strange twist that I have very, very mixed feelings about how to take, particularly because both are plausible, yet neither are relatively well supported. It's kind of like Mulholland Drive. It's like every time there's a theory, there's about 9 more holes you have to unplug. I mean, you have to plug up.
Well, that's a whole different ball game.
That is a whole different ball game, but I'm just bringing that up in terms of like twists that people are trying to figure out how to explain and just are having a nightmare of a time trying to figure it out.
Well, that's a good conversation piece, as I think this one is, and I believe you gave Mulholland Drive like an A-. So, but
however, the conclusion to Mulholland Drive is not nihilistic, and
I'm saying, Justin, if you don't like that, and that's impacting the grade, which it obviously is, you're saying this movie feels like it doesn't matter because of what they say. I think the ending is powerful. I think that tells you everything you need to know about the character right there. He's like, you're like, I mean, I was like, whoa. And if you don't like this, you're not going to like Rules of Attraction when I run that. Because the guy has a habit of just saying, oh, all this stuff happened. Maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, let me ask you this, Justin. Because you mentioned that, okay, you never want to watch it again. But did you feel the same way the first time you watched it? Or was this something that because this is the second viewing, you feel more strongly about?
No, I mean, I saw American Psycho, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago. And I just thought to myself after I saw it the first time, I really want to give this some time, come back to it when I'm older and wiser, and see what I was thinking about. So honestly, I was giving it a legitimate shot.
Okay.
Am I missing something? I don't know. I invite conversation, to be honest with you.
I mean, I don't think you're missing anything. You're not wrong. I mean, one of the big themes of the movie is nihilistic, that people don't matter. That's the character's perspective. But that's not necessarily the author saying, this is the way it should be. This is a commentary on how he thinks other people are. Maybe to some degree how he feels, but it's not necessarily how you have to take it. You can interpret it that way. I mean, some people think this movie is hilarious, and they just watch it for the Christian Bale chainsaw stuff, and they don't care about this stuff. You can have a variety of perspectives. I mean,
oh yeah,
I think you're letting that bother you a little too much because
it has all these really awesome themes, and then says nope, doesn't matter. It's all
no. I don't think that makes it null.
I didn't necessarily take it like that.
I don't think it's all null and void. I think this character's working through this in his mind in his own way. He's saying, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's not like he automatically comes to the conclusion. He is wrestling with something. I will admit, I am very surprised that you liked it significantly more than Justin. Sometimes I'm surprised. I thought you might not like this one, man. I didn't know.
I mean,
what didn't you think I would like about it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, It's
really violent.
It's a little. I thought you might think it's a little pretentious. It's a little bit. I'm a fancy writer, and this is '80s high society, and I'm so much better because he kind of that's kind of his thing. He makes fun of that whole perspective.
Yes.
In a less nice way than RoboCop, ironically. But it's in that same vein, you know?
Yeah, I suppose so, but I don't know. Good writing is still good writing. You know? And I feel like certainly a movie like this invites conversation, but it's significantly more watchable and interesting than a lot of other quote-unquote think pieces.
Artsy films.
You know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think it gets people thinking. Definitely. It's worth talking about, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very memorable, too. I mean, like, a lot of the more arty films we watch that maybe don't have as clear a narrative or something, this has really memorable scenes and characters and murders and, you know, and I think that helps, too.
Yeah, that's true. Just wasn't sure if it was going to be quite your cup of tea.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, actually.
That's good.
All right, well, our final movie is our Oscar A to Z film, and that is Atlantic City. This was a 1980 film nominated for 5 Oscars, and they all qualify in the major categories that we look for the A to Z. Best Actor, Actress, Director, Picture, and Original Screenplay. It lost many, if not all of those, to On Golden Pond. That was sort of the year for that movie. But let's hear about Atlantic City, Justin.
Sally, played by Susan Sarandon, is a waitress with big aspirations when her husband returns trying to sell his stolen cocaine with the help of a former gangster named Lou, played by Burt Lancaster. Though when Sally's husband ends up getting killed from the same mobsters he stole from, she and Lou attempt to escape the city before it's too late. Similar to the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, it's important not to go into this one expecting a straight-up crime and gangster movie. Atlantic City is more or less of a character study, exploring what later life is like after the tension of organized crime, and the toll it eventually takes on others in the process. Obviously not glamorizing it, but rather, if anything, rather demonizing it. This really allows Lancaster to shine as Lou, coming to terms with his limitations, and how he views other people and trying to fulfill his own desires, even though he's had all these prior obligations for so long. It's interesting until we get to the end, where everything that started off really good and really compelling just stops and doesn't really add anything. It's not a bad film. I can see how some of the nominations were warranted. It's certainly not great. I leave it with a B.
Joe?
I think the coolest thing about this movie was I really liked that with Burt Lancaster's character. I liked the fact that they had this idea of the old wizened gangster, and that has been used before, but to really get to see somebody that didn't really get to quite make a name for themselves and tries so hard later on, but to kind of also be sort of a good guy, I kind of liked that. I thought that was interesting, and his journey, his particular arc was good. I liked that a lot. And that's pretty much it, though. I thought the rest of the backdrop was okay. I liked some of the side elements, but some things just kind of came out of nowhere and just ended kind of abruptly. Like the murder, there was a murder that was really gruesome, but just kind of really just came out of nowhere. The gangsters themselves, the antagonists were a dime a dozen, barely established. The one guy was just like, hey, here's $1,000, random woman that gives me... I don't know. It just didn't seem quite as fluid as it could have been. And I usually like Susan Sarandon, but I don't know. I thought that she wasn't giving it her A game here, and her character was really annoying. Maybe that's the way she was written, but I felt like the movie was primarily good when focusing on that major plot point and where it was going. Some things intertwined well, but for the most part, it kind of didn't flow as well as it could have ultimately, I think, overall, with all those plot elements. But I do agree with you, Justin. It has some good aspects to it that I thought were really trying for something original. But I don't think it was worthy of being nominated for everything for Best Picture or whatever. It's a B.
Okay. Well, I think the great strength of this movie, in addition to the great performances by the leads, is that director Louis Malle perfectly captures the time and the place here. This was a city sort of in ruins almost. You know, they were trying to build it back up at the time. And, you know, it's captured perfectly here. I've only seen Lancaster in his later work, so I can't really speak for some of his most well-known performances, but he really turns in something special with this. I can see why he was nominated. Joe, I'm sort of with you. I mean, Susan Sarandon, I was surprised she was nominated for this, but I don't think she gave a bad performance, you know.
I don't know. I've seen her do better.
You know, that may be more a character
Well,
how the character was written in her performance.
that was the hard thing for me to decipher. But
yeah.
I see her playing generally stronger characters.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, Reggie Love. I mean,
Well,
the client. You know.
Right. I think most of the supporting characters here, like you say, Joe, don't really stand out. The plot also at times is like really far-fetched. But I think as a character study, at least for those two leads, it works decently enough. I give it a B as well. But what's shocking to me about this movie is that it is so highly regarded critically and just in those circles. Obviously, it was nominated for all these Oscars, but it's also in the National Film Registry. It was selected for that. It was nominated for both of AFI's top 100 film lists.
Really?
Didn't make the cut, but it was nominated both times.
Wow.
So obviously, something has been lost in the translation, I feel like, over the last 30, 35 years. Because, A, none of us have ever even heard of this movie. You know, and it's not that old. I mean, I was alive when this was out. And, you know, it obviously doesn't get talked about. It's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
It's obviously a very highly regarded movie. So I don't know what it is that sort of got lost, maybe that we are missing that really spoke to the previous generation or two. I don't know.
Well, I mean, my wager of a guess would be just kind of, just judging by the age of the actors at the prominence, I guess, really late in his career, maybe kind of a swan song for him.
Okay, sort of a sentimental
sort of thing.
I can see that.
Because it's kind of an homage to, like, earlier pictures, probably with earlier gangster movies and those sort of things. You have the aging gangster, plus the whole economic turmoil in the early 80s, plus with Atlantic City, maybe
true.
that spoke to something about the time
I was going to say, there's some pretty heavy metaphors in there that I'm sure they were taking it.
Yeah.
They were, like, totally going into for the 80s.
Probably hit the right notes at the time.
At the time,
I could
right.
feel that, but like I said, it's almost like there were some things we're assumed to know. And some of those movies, I think, probably were nominated at the time because of big things that maybe we have less relevance now.
Yeah, I guess so. I just thought that was weird. I mean, I knew it was nominated for all that stuff, but to find out that it's still so highly regarded 35 years later, yet completely under the radar.
Maybe there is
this
something
movie.
we're missing.
You know? Yeah.
I don't know.
Another entry into the prediction list, Joe?
Well, I don't think it's like Road to Perdition. I don't think it's an A+, but maybe it is.
No, but I mean, if it's nominated for all this stuff, and
Maybe it was at the time.
Maybe it
not
was Road to
spoken
Perdition.
at all ever since.
Right, right.
That's possible. It could be Perdition.
Yeah. All right, who knows? Well, next week we'll have another Oscar pick for you guys in our A to Z list as we go through. We are almost done the A's, by the way. It's almost 2 years after the fact. So we will have sort of a mini-sode surrounding the best and the worst of the A movies in the Oscar docket. But that is going to wrap it up for the show this week. We have Listener's Choice coming up in April, in just a couple weeks, actually. So if you do have a Listener's Choice selection you'd like us to talk about on the show, as long as it is more than 2 years old, it can count as an old classic. You can hit us up on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, or on our Twitter, at Film Fanatics Pod, or you can make a comment right here on the YouTube page. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, go ahead and do that. And of course you can subscribe to Joe's Merlin channel as well, which we are subscribed to, so you can link to that from us and in the description of the show. So that is going to do it for us. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!